Have you ever really stopped to think about how stories with talking animals have, for literally thousands of years, shaped how we think about right and wrong? Well, today, we are diving deep into the ancient and frankly, super powerful world of fables. And trust me, these are not just cute stories for kids. They're like these tiny, perfect engines of wisdom that have been guiding cultures for millennia. Let's do it. Yeah, besides being characters you've known since you were a kid, they all star in a very specific kind of story. A genre of storytelling that has had us hooked for centuries. And that genre, of course, is the fable. So what is a fable, really? Well, at its core, it's a short, made-up story with one big goal: to teach you a moral lesson. But the real magic is in the characters. We're talking animals, plants, even the wind, and they're all given human qualities. This lets them act out our best and worst traits on a simple, relatable stage. And these stories, they all follow a simple but really effective recipe. First off, they're super short, right? They get straight to the point, no fluff. They use anthropomorphism, that's just the fancy word for giving human traits to non-human things, which makes the lesson way easier to swallow. Then you've got the characters, who are basically symbols for human qualities, like a sneaky fox or a majestic lion. And finally, there's always a crystal clear moral, usually spelled out for you right at the end. This quote just nails it. The first-century philosopher Apollonius of Tyana said this about the most famous fable writer of all time, Aesop. And it's so true. Fables take these small, everyday moments and just blow them up into these huge, profound lessons about life, ethics, and how we all get along. So that brings up a good question. Where did these amazing stories even come from? Well, for a huge chunk of the world, all roads lead back to one legendary guy. No, don't get me wrong. Fables have popped up in cultures all over the planet, from India to Africa. But in the Western world, the tradition is totally dominated by one man whose name is basically shorthand for the genre itself, Aesop. So who was this guy? Well, we believe Aesop was a slave and a storyteller in ancient Greece more than 2,500 years ago. He wasn't some king or famous philosopher, but his wisdom, all wrapped up in these clever little tales, has outlasted entire empires. And here's the part that's so important. He didn't write any of this down. His stories were spoken, part of a living, breathing oral tradition. Now, get this. There is a 300-year gap between when Aesop was alive, telling his stories, and the first time anyone ever wrote them down. For 3 centuries, these fables existed only in the memories of the people who heard them and then retold them. I mean, that's an absolutely incredible testament to their power, that they could survive that long just through word of mouth. So what was the secret sauce? How did they make these stories so memorable? Well, a huge part of it was symbolism. The animals are never just animals. They are archetypes. The fox always stands for cleverness or trickery. The lion, that's pride and power. The mouse can be humility. And the ant, well, that's the classic symbol for hard work. It's like a mental shortcut that makes the moral hit home instantly. Okay, so from one storyteller in ancient Greece, how in the world did these fables completely conquer the globe? Their journey is honestly just as amazing as the stories themselves. It all starts right here, in the town squares and at the dinner parties of ancient Greece. Aesop's simple, powerful stories weren't being read out of books. They were being performed, shared, and passed from one person to the next. Then, as the Roman Empire rose, the fables traveled right along with it. Writers like Phaedrus translated them into Latin, which made sure they became a fundamental part of education and culture all across the empire. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, they were translated again, this time from Latin into the languages ordinary people actually spoke: French, German, English, you name it. And writers at the time would adapt them, tweaking the morals to fit the values of their own society. And then came the absolute game changer, the printing press. Suddenly, collections of Aesop's fables were among the very first books ever printed in all sorts of languages. This was like pouring gasoline on the fire, allowing them to spread faster and wider than anyone could have ever imagined. And that journey went everywhere. I mean, fables were translated into Asian languages like Japanese and Chinese. Missionaries adapted them into Nahuatl in Mexico and Creole in the Caribbean. They were even translated into Zulu in Africa. Aesop's simple tales really truly became the world's stories. So here's the big question. After thousands of years, why are we still talking about them? In our complex, high-tech, modern world, what gives these simple little stories such incredible staying power? You know, a great way to understand their unique appeal is to compare them to their close cousin, the fable. Now, both teach lessons, right? But parables usually have human characters and their morals are often just implied, left open for you to figure out. Fables, though, they use animals, which kind of softens the blow of the lesson, and the moral is almost always stated directly. There's no guesswork involved. It's crystal clear. Ultimately, fables do two things at once. They're like a mirror, reflecting the values and anxieties of a society at any given moment. But they're also a molder, actively shaping those values by teaching generation after generation of kids and adults about things like honesty, kindness, and wisdom. For over 2,500 years, these stories have been passed down. Just let that sink in. And why? Because their simplicity is their greatest strength. Their morals are universal. And their characters are completely timeless. That's the real secret to their endurance. And this isn't just ancient history, folks. Fables are incredible teaching tools that are being used in classrooms right now. They help kids visualize stories through art, they help them internalize morals by acting them out, they teach complex ideas like symbolism, and they build critical thinking skills by having kids compare different tales. Their power to educate is just as strong today as it ever was.
So I want to leave you with this thought. Fables have always managed to capture the spirit of their time in a simple story with a clear moral. If a new Aesop were writing a fable today about our world, what human weakness would they focus on? What talking animals would they use to tell the story? And maybe most importantly, what lesson would they want us to learn? A really interesting thing to think about.